Back inside, Wolvis dropped the meat in front of her pups, nudging them forward with her nose. They were hesitant at first, but hunger overcame their fear, and they began to eat. Wolvis kept watch, her ears swiveling toward the entrance, where the man remained. The furless one's intentions. The human didn't leave. He set up a small camp nearby, close enough to the cave that Wolvis could see him, but far enough that he didn't intrude on her space. He made a fire, a small one, and sat beside it as the day faded into evening. Wolvis kept a close eye on him, her body tense and ready to attack if he tried anything suspicious. But he didn't. He just sat there, occasionally glancing toward the cave, as if to check on her. As night fell, the cold became even more brutal. The fire the man had built glowed warmly in the darkness, its light flickering on the snow. Inside the cave, Wolvis shivered. Her pups were huddled against her, but their small bodies weren't enough to keep her warm. The cave provided shelter from the wind, but not from the bitter cold. The man, sensing their plight, did something unexpected. He got up from his spot and approached the cave once more. Wolvis growled, a low warning in the back of her throat, but the man did not advance further. He placed a few more pieces of dried meat near the entrance, then stepped back. But this time, he did something different. He gestured toward the fire, then toward the cave. He was inviting her, offering her warmth. Wolvis hesitated, trusting a furless one was against every instinct she had, but the cold was relentless, and her pups were too young to survive without warmth. She knew that if the temperature dropped any further, they would freeze. After what felt like an eternity, she made her decision. Slowly, cautiously, she picked up her pups, one by one, and carried them toward the fire. The man didn't move. He simply watched, his blue eyes steady and calm. Wolvis placed her pups near the warmth, keeping herself between them and the man. She lay down, her body curled protectively around them. The warmth of the fire seeped into her fur, easing the cold that had settled deep in her bones. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Her pups, too, seemed to relax, their small bodies pressing against hers as they drifted off into sleep. The man remained by the fire, his back to the cave. He didn't attempt to approach her or the pups. He simply sat there, his presence a strange but not entirely unwelcome one. Wolvis watched him with cautious eyes, still unsure of his intentions, but too tired to drive him away. As the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, the two unlikely companions, wolf and man, shared the warmth in silence. A tenuous bond was forming, one forged not out of trust, but out of necessity. Wolvis watched the man's figure disappear into the forest, his form becoming a shadow among the trees. She turned her attention back to her pups, who had settled into a lighter sleep. Their tiny bodies were still shivering, but she did her best to keep them warm with her own fur. The cave was cold, but sheltered them from the biting wind. Wolvis inspected their surroundings, trying to reassure herself that they were safe here, at least for the moment. The remnants of the fire were just enough to ward off the worst of the chill, but she knew they needed food soon. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as she waited. The storm had passed, but the world outside was still draped in heavy snow, a blanket of white that made the forest seem distant and unreachable. She could only hope the man was as good as his word, and that he would return soon. Minutes turned into hours, and just as the sun began its slow climb higher in the sky, Wolvis heard the faint crackling of branches. Her ears perked up, her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and fear. The man emerged from the trees, his hands carrying the weight of a small deer. He set the deer down carefully and glanced at Wolvis. She approached cautiously, her nose twitching at the scent of fresh meat. The man didn't make any sudden movements, allowing Wolvis to inspect the offering. She hesitated for a moment before nudging the deer with her muzzle, confirming that it was indeed what they needed. The man seemed to understand her gratitude, and he went to gather some more wood for the fire. As the flames began to flicker back to life, Wolvis started to tear into the meat, sharing pieces with her pups, who eagerly nuzzled and fed. The warmth of the food and the fire began to bring some comfort, and she could see the tension easing from her pups' tiny forms. For now, Wolvis allowed herself a moment of relaxation. They were still in a precarious situation, but this small act of kindness had given them a chance to recover. She kept a wary eye on the man, but for now they had a fragile peace that she hoped would hold. A bond forged in the frost. In the heart of a desolate winter, a vast, untamed wilderness lay blanketed by snow and ice. The air was frigid, thick with the biting cold that could seep deep into one's bones. In this remote part of the world, survival was unforgiving, a game where only the fittest could continue to play. Here, in this frozen land, where the sun barely rose above the horizon, life clung desperately to any sign of warmth or shelter. Amid this harsh landscape, a lone she-wolf, Wolvis, stood at the mouth of a cave. Her sleek coat of silver fur, streaked with patches of black, blended into the pale, icy world around her. Her eyes, golden and sharp, scanned the horizon with a watchfulness that came from years of survival. She was no ordinary wolf. Her kind had long been hunted by humans, those furless, unpredictable creatures who wandered into her territory and claimed dominion over everything. This particular winter was crueler than most. Wolvis had lost her pack not long ago, slaughtered by the very beings who now roamed the wilds. Her heart was heavy with grief, but she had not the luxury of mourning. Her 4 pups, barely weaned and fragile in their newness to the world, were her only remaining family, and they depended on her for everything. Inside the cave, the pups huddled together for warmth, their small bodies trembling as the wind howled outside. They were too young to understand the dangers that lurked beyond the safety of the cave, too young to realize that their survival was a slim thread, one that could easily be severed. Wolvis paced at the entrance, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. She was hungry, desperately so. Her ribs were beginning to show beneath her thick fur, and her body ached with the effort of keeping her pups alive. She had not eaten in days, but her hunger was secondary to their safety. The land was barren, and what little prey remained was difficult to find. Worse yet, she was not the only hunter prowling the icy wilderness. Suddenly, her ears twitched. Her keen hearing picked up the faintest sound, a disturbance in the rhythm of the wind. Something was approaching. She tensed, lowering herself into a crouch, her muscles coiled and ready to spring. Her mind raced. It could be another predator, a rival wolf perhaps, or worse, one of the furless ones. The sound grew closer. Footsteps, light but deliberate, crunched through the snow. Wolvis growled low in her throat, warning whatever was out there that this cave was claimed. Her pups whimpered from within, sensing her tension. Then, emerging from the snowstorm like a ghost, a figure appeared. It was a furless one, a human male, draped in furs and leather, his face partially covered by a hood. His eyes, sharp and blue as the ice that covered the riverbanks, locked onto the cave entrance where Wolvis stood her ground. He carried a spear, though it was lowered, not in a position to strike. For a moment, the two locked eyes, wolf and man, predator and predator. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Wolvis's fur bristled, her lip curling back to reveal sharp fangs. She could feel the man's eyes assessing her, trying to determine whether she would attack. Her instincts screamed at her to chase him off, to defend her pups with everything she had, but something in the man's posture gave her pause. The man did not move to attack. He stayed where he was, watching her with careful eyes. Slowly, cautiously, he knelt down, placing his spear on the ground in front of him, a gesture of submission. He was not here to harm her. Wolvis didn't know what to make of this. Humans were known to be deceptive, but this one, he seemed different. The smell of the wild clung to him, mingling with the scent of the earth and fire. He didn't reek of the smoke and metal that usually accompanied the furless ones who raided the forests. The man removed his hood, revealing a weathered face marked by years of exposure to the elements. His gaze softened as he spoke, though his words meant nothing to Wolvis. Still, his tone was calm, without threat. He extended a hand slowly, pulling something from his pack. It was a small piece of meat, dried and cured, likely from a hunt. Wolvis eyed the offering suspiciously. The man placed the meat on the snow, just out of reach, and then backed away slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. He was waiting, offering her a choice. For several long moments, Wolvis didn't move. She was no stranger to the tricks of humans, but Humber gnawed at her insides, and her pups needed her strength. Slowly, cautiously, she approached the meat, keeping one eye on the man. She sniffed it, her nose twitching as she tested it for poison or foul play. Finding none, she snatched it up quickly and retreated into the cave. The man didn't move. As Wolvis and her pups ate, the man worked in silence, tending to the fire and arranging the cave's entrance to block the cold wind. His movements were deliberate and careful, a contrast to the earlier tension. Wolvis watched him with cautious curiosity, noting how he seemed to move with a practiced ease. After the pups were fed and had fallen into a satisfied slumber, Wolvis lay down near the fire, her eyes never straying far from the man. The warmth of the fire was a welcome relief, and she could feel her own body relaxing despite the lingering unease. The man finally settled down on a flat rock near the fire, pulling out a small, worn book from his pack. He flipped through its pages with a contemplative expression, as if searching for something. The book was old, its cover frayed and its pages yellowed. Occasionally, he would glance up at Wolvis, his gaze thoughtful but not intrusive. The silence in the cave was punctuated only by the crackling of the fire and the soft, rhythmic breathing of the sleeping pups. Wolvis felt a strange sense of calm, though she remained alert. She had learned to trust her instincts, and right now, they were telling her that the man's actions, though odd, were not threatening. After some time, the man closed the book and stowed it away, then began to prepare for the night. He set up a small bedroll on the other side of the fire, keeping a respectful distance from where Wolvis and her pups rested. His movements were deliberate, aimed at making himself as unobtrusive as possible. As dusk settled over the cave, the man took out a small piece of dried meat and began to chew thoughtfully. He seemed to be contemplating something, his eyes occasionally drifting to the fire or to Wolvis. There was a quiet resolve in his demeanor, and for the first time, Wolvis saw something in him that resembled a kind of empathy. Eventually, the man turned in for the night, lying on his bedroll with a sigh of exhaustion. He had made no attempt to approach Wolvis or her pups further, respecting the boundary she had established. As he settled into sleep, the fire's glow cast long, flickering shadows on the walls of the cave. Wolvis remained vigilant, her eyes scanning the cave's entrance and the darkness beyond. The man's presence was still unsettling, but the immediate danger had lessened. For now, they had a fragile peace, and she would hold on to it as long as she could. As the night wore on, Wolvis felt a deep, protective wariness settle over her. The pups slept soundly, their bellies full and their bodies warm. The man's presence, while still mysterious, had offered them a reprieve from the harsh elements outside. With a soft sigh, Wolvis closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of rest. Her dreams were filled with fleeting images of safety and warmth, a stark contrast to the fears that had haunted her before. For tonight, at least, there was a sense of calm, and she clung to it, hoping it would last until the morning light brought with it new possibilities. The night passed quietly, with only the gentle crackling of the fire and the occasional stir of the pups breaking the stillness. Wolvis woke several times, her senses alert to any changes, but the man remained still and undisturbed. As dawn approached, the cave slowly brightened with the soft light of morning, casting a warm glow that made the world outside seem less intimidating. The man woke with the sunrise, stretching his limbs and yawning as he gathered his belongings. He moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for another day. After a brief glance at Wolvis and her pups, he began to dismantle his makeshift camp, packing away his gear with careful attention. Wolvis, ever vigilant, observed his movements. There was a part of her that still questioned his intentions, but his behavior had been consistent, and his actions seemed to focus on ensuring their continued safety rather than causing harm. She watched as he prepared a simple breakfast for himself, some dried fruits and nuts, and then, without much ceremony, offered a small portion to her. The gesture was tentative but sincere. Wolvis hesitated before approaching, her instincts at war with her need. She took the offered food, inspecting it with wary eyes before consuming it. It wasn't much, but it was enough to bolster her strength and provide a bit of comfort. With the fire reduced to embers, the man gathered his gear and prepared to leave. He paused at the entrance of the cave, turning back to glance at Wolvis. He made a small, reassuring gesture, a kind of nod or bow, before stepping out into the crisp morning air. The snow crunched under his boots as he made his way into the forest, disappearing once more among the trees. With the man gone, the cave felt quieter, but it also felt like a sanctuary of sorts. Wolvis knew she needed to find more food and assess their situation, but for now, she took solace in the relative safety they had. She resolved to stay alert and to be ready for whatever came next. The day stretched out before her, filled with the promise of new challenges and opportunities. Wolvis prepared herself for the journey ahead, knowing that her primary focus would be the well-being of her pups. The world outside the cave was still harsh and unforgiving, but for the moment, they had a chance to rest and recover. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Wolvis felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her moving forward. She knew that the forest held many uncertainties, but with her pups safe and the man's unexpected aid, she felt a renewed determination to face whatever lay ahead. With the man's departure, the cave fell back into its quiet solitude. Wolvis took a deep breath, savoring the relative warmth and security of their temporary refuge. The pups were still nestled against her, their tiny bodies slowly warming as they continued to sleep. The morning sun filtered weakly through the entrance, casting long shadows that danced with the flickering light of the dying embers. Wolvis decided it was time to check the cave's surroundings, ensuring there were no new threats and looking for any signs that might indicate where they were or what might lie ahead. Stepping cautiously outside, Wolvis surveyed the landscape. The world was a stark, silent expanse of white. The storm had left behind a thick blanket of snow that covered the ground and clung to the trees, creating a shimmering, if oppressive, winter wonderland. The air was crisp and cold, and the silence was profound, broken only by the occasional distant call of a bird or the soft crunch of snow underfoot. Wolvis padded carefully through the snow, her keen senses alert for any signs of danger or opportunities. The forest, while beautiful in its own way, held countless hidden threats. She paused occasionally to sniff the ground, searching for any signs of prey or tracks that might indicate a safe path to follow. After some time, she came across a faint trail of a small animal, possibly a rabbit or a squirrel. It was a promising sign, and she followed the trail with cautious excitement. The tracks led her deeper into the forest, weaving through the trees and over small hills. The snow made it challenging to move swiftly, but Wolvis's determination drove her forward. As she ventured further, she couldn't help but be struck by the beauty of the winter forest. The snow-laden branches of the trees glistened like diamonds in the weak sunlight, and the stillness was oddly calming. Yet, beneath this serene veneer, Wolvis remained acutely aware of the dangers that could emerge at any moment. After following the trail for a while, Wolvis spotted a small burrow at the base of a tree. She approached cautiously, her nose twitching as she detected the faint scent of the animal that had made the tracks. The burrow appeared undisturbed, and she sniffed around it to ensure that it was empty. With a satisfied grunt, Wolvis began to dig carefully around the burrow. Her paws moved with practiced efficiency, and soon she uncovered a small cache of food that the animal had stored. It wasn't a large amount, but it was enough to supplement their diet and provide some much-needed sustenance. As she carried the food back to the cave, Wolvis felt a renewed sense of hope. The forest, while harsh, had offered up a small boon. She made her way back through the snow, her steps more confident now that she had found a source of food. Upon returning to the cave, Wolvis found her pups stirring. They woke to the sight of their mother with the food, their little noses twitching in anticipation. Wolvis shared the meal with them, their small, eager faces brightening as they fed. The addition of fresh food brought a welcome change to their diet and provided a much-needed boost. With the pups now content and the cave's warmth restored, Wolvis took a moment to rest. She lay down beside them, her body relaxing as she kept a watchful eye on their surroundings. The cave was still a safe haven, but she knew that they couldn't stay here indefinitely. The world outside was vast and uncertain, and their next steps would need to be carefully considered. As the day wore on, Wolvis reflected on their situation. The man's unexpected kindness had been a rare and valuable respite, and she was grateful for the brief period of safety it had provided. Yet, the forest was still filled with challenges, and she needed to be prepared for whatever might come next. As night approached, Wolvis and her pups huddled together in the cave. The fire had burned low, but it provided enough warmth to keep the chill at bay. Wolvis kept the entrance of the cave under close watch, her senses alert for any signs of danger. The night was quiet, with only the occasional rustle of wind or distant call of a nocturnal creature breaking the silence. Wolvis felt a mix of fatigue and determination. The world outside remained harsh and unforgiving, but she was resolved to protect her pups and ensure their survival. As she lay there, the gentle rise and fall of her pups' breathing providing a soothing rhythm, Wolvis allowed herself a moment of respite. The challenges ahead were daunting, but with her pups safe for the moment and a small source of food secured, she felt a flicker of hope. The forest would continue to test them, but Wolvis was prepared to face whatever lay ahead. For now, they had a fragile peace, and she would hold onto it as long as she could. With renewed resolve, Wolvis settled into a watchful sleep, ready to face the new day and whatever challenges it might bring. As the night deepened, the cave remained a sanctuary of warmth and safety, a fragile cocoon amidst the harshness of the winter forest. Wolvis slept lightly, her senses always on alert despite the comforting presence of the fire and her pup's steady breathing. The morning arrived slowly, with the first light of dawn filtering through the cave's entrance. Wolvis stirred, stretching her limbs and gently nudging her pups awake. They blinked sleepily, their small faces lifting in curiosity as the new day began. The food she had found yesterday had revitalized them, and their energy levels were higher than before. Wolvis knew they couldn't stay in the cave forever. The forest was a place of both danger and opportunity, and they needed to be prepared for the challenges it presented. After a quick breakfast of what remained of the small catch of food, Wolvis made a decision. It was time to venture further into the forest to scout for a more permanent solution. With her pups securely nestled against her, Wolvis prepared to leave the cave. She checked the surroundings to ensure there were no immediate threats and then set off with determined strides. The snow-covered landscape was both beautiful and treacherous, and she moved carefully to avoid slipping or making unnecessary noise. The forest, though still serene, was more alive than it had been during the storm. The soft crunch of snow underfoot was accompanied by the distant calls of birds and the occasional rustle of animals moving through the underbrush. Wolvis kept a close watch, her keen senses alert for any signs of danger. As they traveled, Wolvis came across several potential sources of food. She found tracks of deer and other small game, which could be valuable in sustaining her and her pups. She marked the locations mentally, knowing that these could be useful for future reference. The journey led them to a small clearing, where the snow had been disturbed by the recent movement of larger animals. In the center of the clearing was a small frozen pond. The ice was thick, but the water beneath it was clear, indicating that the pond might not be entirely frozen. Wolvis approached cautiously, examining the area for any signs of danger. The clearing also provided a broader view of the surrounding forest. From this vantage point, Wolvis could see that the forest stretched far beyond the immediate area, with dense trees and thick underbrush. It was clear that there were many potential paths to explore, but the winter landscape made travel challenging. With the clearing providing a temporary respite, Wolvis allowed her pups to rest while she assessed their situation. She took the opportunity to gather some small branches and twigs, which she used to build a small, makeshift shelter to provide them with some protection from the cold wind. As she worked, Wolvis reflected on their situation. The man's kindness had been a rare gift, but the forest was still a place of uncertainty. She needed to find a more stable source of food and ensure that they had a safe place to stay. The search for such a place would require careful planning and vigilance. The hours passed, and the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. The clearing, while offering some comfort, would not be suitable for an extended stay. Wolvis decided it was time to return to the cave for the night. They had ventured far enough for today, and the safety of their temporary refuge was worth the return journey. As they made their way back to the cave, Wolvis remained alert, her senses attuned to any potential threats. The forest seemed to grow darker as the sun set, casting long shadows that stretched across the snow. Despite the increasing chill, Wolvis's determination remained unwavering. Back at the cave, the fire had died down to embers. Wolvis rekindled it, the warmth providing a welcome relief from the cold. Her pups huddled close, their small forms seeking the comfort of her presence. The night fell slowly, and the cave once again became a haven of warmth and safety. As Wolvis settled down beside her pups, she reflected on the day's journey. It had been challenging, but it had also provided valuable insights into their surroundings. The forest was vast and full of possibilities, but it also held many dangers. She would need to be cautious and resourceful to ensure their continued survival. The night was quiet, with only the gentle crackling of the fire and the soft rustling of the wind outside breaking the silence. Wolvis kept a watchful eye on the cave's entrance, her senses alert for any signs of trouble. The forest, though beautiful, was still a place of uncertainty, and she remained ever vigilant. As her pups fell into a peaceful sleep, Wolvis allowed herself a moment of rest. The challenges ahead were daunting, but with each passing day, they were one step closer to finding a more stable and secure place to call home. For now, she would hold on to the hope that the forest's mysteries would reveal themselves in time, and that they would find the safety and security they so desperately needed. The night passed quietly, and the cave remained a sanctuary amidst the harsh winter landscape. The fire's glow cast a warm, comforting light, and Wolvis slept fitfully, her mind constantly drifting between rest and vigilance. Her dreams were filled with shifting shadows of the forest and the faces of her pups, a mixture of hope and concern that mirrored her waking thoughts. As the first light of dawn seeped through the cave entrance, Wolvis woke with a start. Her pups were stirring beside her, their tiny forms stretching as they awoke. The cave's warmth was a welcome contrast to the cold that awaited them outside, but Wolvis knew that they couldn't stay here forever. She roused her pups, encouraging them to move and prepare for the day. They responded with sleepy curiosity, their little eyes blinking as they adjusted to the morning light. After a quick breakfast of the remaining food, Wolvis prepared to venture out once more. She needed to explore further, to gather more resources and find a more sustainable solution for their survival. As they stepped out into the crisp morning air, Wolvis felt a renewed sense of determination. The forest was still blanketed in snow, but the sky was clear, promising a day of better visibility. She led her pups carefully, moving through the snow with practiced ease. Their journey took them through a variety of terrain, dense thickets, open meadows, and winding trails. Wolvis kept a watchful eye on her surroundings, her senses alert for any signs of danger or potential resources. The forest was full of hidden dangers, but it also held opportunities for those who knew where to look. After several hours of exploration, Wolvis and her pups came across a small, abandoned cabin nestled among the trees. The cabin was weathered and covered in snow, but it seemed to be in relatively good condition. Wolvis approached cautiously, sniffing the air and inspecting the area for any signs of recent activity. The cabin's door was ajar, and Wolvis nudged it open with her nose. Inside, she found a small, dusty space with a few remnants of old supplies, a few cans of food, some broken furniture, and a pile of firewood. It was clear that the cabin had been unused for some time, but it offered a promising new refuge. Wolvis led her pups inside, their eyes wide with curiosity as they explored the cabin. The space was small but sturdy, and it provided better shelter from the elements than the cave. The firewood was a welcome find, and Wolvis quickly set about starting a fire in the cabin's old stone fireplace. As the fire crackled to life, the cabin began to warm, and the pups settled in, their little bodies relaxing in the newfound comfort. Wolvis took stock of the supplies, finding enough to sustain them for several days if they rationed carefully. The cans of food were old but still usable, and the firewood would be a valuable resource for maintaining warmth. With the cabin offering a temporary haven, Wolvis felt a sense of relief. The forest was still a place of uncertainty, but the cabin provided a more stable environment for her and her pups. She knew that they couldn't let their guard down completely, but for now, they had a place to rest and regroup. The night passed quietly, and the cave remained a sanctuary amidst the harsh winter landscape. The fire's glow cast a warm, comforting light, and Wolvis slept fitfully, her mind constantly drifting between rest and vigilance. Her dreams were filled with shifting shadows of the forest and the faces of her pups, a mixture of hope and concern that mirrored her waking thoughts. As the first light of dawn seeped through the cave entrance, Wolvis woke with a start. Her pups were stirring beside her, their tiny forms stretching as they awoke. The cave's warmth was a welcome contrast to the cold that awaited them outside, but Wolvis knew that they couldn't stay here forever. She roused her pups, encouraging them to move and prepare for the day. They responded with sleepy curiosity, their little eyes blinking as they adjusted to the morning light. After a quick breakfast of the remaining food, Wolvis prepared to venture out once more. She needed to explore further, to gather more resources and find a more sustainable solution for their survival. As they stepped out into the crisp morning air, Wolvis felt a renewed sense of determination. The forest was still blanketed in snow, but the sky was clear, promising a day of better visibility. She led her pups carefully, moving through the snow with practiced ease. Their journey took them through a variety of terrain, dense thickets, open meadows, and winding trails. Wolvis kept a watchful eye on her surroundings, her senses alert for any signs of danger or potential resources. The forest was full of hidden dangers, but it also held opportunities for those who knew where to look. After several hours of exploration, Wolvis and her pups came across a small, abandoned cabin nestled among the trees. The cabin was weathered and covered in snow, but it seemed to be in relatively good condition. Wolvis approached cautiously, sniffing the air and inspecting the area for any signs of recent activity. The cabin's door was ajar, and Wolvis nudged it open with her nose. Inside, she found a small, dusty space with a few remnants of old supplies, a few cans of food, some broken furniture, and a pile of firewood. It was clear that the cabin had been unused for some time, but it offered a promising new refuge. Wolvis led her pups inside, their eyes wide with curiosity as they explored the cabin. The space was small but sturdy, and it provided better shelter from the elements than the cave. The firewood was a welcome find, and Wolvis quickly set about starting a fire in the cabin's old stone fireplace. As the fire crackled to life, the cabin began to warm, and the pups settled in, their little bodies relaxing in the newfound comfort. Wolvis took stock of the supplies, finding enough to sustain them for several days if they rationed carefully. The cans of food were old but still usable, and the firewood would be a valuable resource for maintaining warmth. With the cabin offering a temporary haven, Wolvis felt a sense of relief. The forest was still a place of uncertainty, but the cabin provided a more stable environment for her and her pups. She knew that they couldn't let their guard down completely, but for now, they had a place to rest and regroup. The rest of the day was spent organizing their new shelter. Wolvis cleared out the dust and debris, making the cabin as comfortable as possible. She used some of the old furniture to create a cozy sleeping area for her pups, arranging it near the fire to provide warmth. As evening approached, the fire in the fireplace cast a warm, flickering light throughout the cabin. The pups were already settling down for the night, their little faces relaxed and content. Wolvis watched over them, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and protectiveness. With the fire crackling and the cabin providing a sense of security, Wolvis allowed herself a moment of respite. The challenges ahead were still formidable, but the day's discoveries had brought a glimmer of hope. They now had a more stable base from which to continue their journey and explore the forest further. As the night settled in, Wolvis sat by the fire, her gaze drifting to the shadows dancing on the cabin walls. The forest outside was dark and silent, but within the cabin's walls, there was a fragile peace. Wolvis knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but for now, she took solace in the warmth and safety they had found. With her pups peacefully asleep and the cabin offering a new sense of stability, Wolvis allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The forest's mysteries were still waiting to be unraveled, but she was ready to face whatever came next with determination and resilience. For now, they had found a small measure of security, and that was enough to hold on to as they prepared for the days to come. As the night deepened, the cabin's warmth wrapped around Wolvis and her pups like a comforting blanket. The fire crackled steadily in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows that flickered across the walls. The pups, exhausted from the day's journey and exploration, had quickly fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep. Their small, rhythmic breathing was a soothing lullaby, a reminder of the precious lives she was determined to protect. Wolvis sat by the fire, her eyes scanning the cabin and the surrounding forest through the small window. The forest was dark, but the moonlight cast a silver sheen over the snow-covered landscape, making the world outside look almost magical in its stillness. She took a moment to appreciate the quiet, a rare gift in their turbulent lives. Despite the comfort of the cabin, Wolvis knew that her situation remained precarious. The forest, while offering shelter and resources, was still a place of unpredictable dangers. She needed to be vigilant, ready to respond to any threats that might arise. The cabin was a welcome respite, but it was not a permanent solution. They would need to continue exploring, foraging, and preparing for the challenges ahead. As the fire began to wane, Wolvis placed another log on it, ensuring that the warmth would last through the night. She took stock of the supplies they had found and made a mental note of what they would need to procure in the coming days. The cans of food and firewood would provide a good start, but they would need to be resourceful and proactive to ensure their long-term survival. With the fire crackling softly and the pups resting comfortably, Wolvis allowed herself a rare moment of relaxation. She curled up near the hearth, her body instinctively positioning itself to provide warmth and protection for her pups. Her eyes grew heavy, but her mind remained alert, ever watchful for any signs of danger. In the quiet of the cabin, Wolvis reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The challenges they had faced and the kindness of the stranger had shaped their path, leading them to this temporary sanctuary. It was a small victory, a moment of peace amidst the chaos of the forest. And while the future remained uncertain, she took comfort in the progress they had made and the hope that guided them forward. As the fire's glow dimmed and the cabin settled into the quiet of the night, Wolvis felt a deep sense of gratitude and determination. They had found a place of safety, however brief, and she was resolved to make the most of it. With her pups secure and the promise of new days ahead, Wolvis closed her eyes, allowing the warmth of the fire and the comfort of her little family to lull her into a restful sleep. The forest outside remained silent and still, a world of beauty and danger wrapped in the cold embrace of winter. But within the cabin's walls, there was a fragile peace, a sanctuary that offered a glimmer of hope in the face of uncertainty. And as the night wore on, Wolvis dreamed of a future where safety and security were not just fleeting moments, but a lasting reality for her and her pups. For now, they'd found a small measure of peace, and that was enough to carry them through the night. The forest would continue to test them, but Wolvis was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and resilience. For her and her pups, this was the beginning of a new chapter, a chance to rebuild, explore, and embrace the possibilities of a world still full of promise.